Today on Martha Bakes, we're going to learn how to bake basic bread. And we're starting with a well-textured white bread, a beautiful golden brown color, excellent for sandwiches, for toast. And we're also doing a grainy bread, wheat berries, rolled oats, bulgur wheat, sunflower seeds, and flaxseed. Really delicious toasted. And last but not least, rye bread, filled with wonderful caraway seeds. Oh, with a big piece of kielbasa grilled on the grill. What a great bread for that. Homemade, home-style breads, and they're very easy to make. Next on Martha Bakes. So now we're going to make the white bread. This is a basic white bread, great bread for sandwiches, for toast, for just bread and butter. And now to a half a cup of warm water, not hotter than 115 degrees, add 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. The 3 breads that we're making today use active dry yeast. And it's nice, you can actually measure a tablespoon. It's so happy to see when the mouth of the jar is wide enough to actually put a tablespoon in. So this gets also 1 tablespoon of sugar, a little food for that yeast. And just whisk it up, let it proof for about, 3 to 5 minutes, just to make sure that it is totally alive. Now into the mixer bowl, and it has a big dough hook, and it's very effective for kneading. And right into the bowl of the mixer, I'll start with 3½ cups of bread flour. Ultimately, we're going to use about 7 cups. And 1 tablespoon of coarse salt, kosher salt. And 2 cups of warm water, about 110 degrees is good. And just turn this on, low, medium. It's definitely going to need some more flour. I'll add another cup right now. Now we can add the proof yeast. You can see the texture of these. It's nice and creamy, getting a few bubbles in the top. It smells really good too. I always use the smell test for yeast. So we're up to 7 cups of flour. Now we're going to let this knead for about 7 minutes before we add 4 tablespoons of softened butter. And the dough hook is working very well. It is picking up all the excess flour in the bottom of the bowl. And you can also let it rest for a minute or 2. I find that that really helps the water absorb into the flour, and it gets softer and easier to work. So now that the dough has a very nice texture, add the butter and let that become totally incorporated into the dough. And now that the dough is almost finished kneading in the machine, butter a big bowl. This is going to be the rising bowl. I remember as a child going next door to Mr. Mouse's house. He and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Mouse, were retired bakers, and they always had dough rising in their basement, which was covered with flour. It was one of the best experiences I can remember, visiting with the Mouses and learning how to work with dough. They were the best teachers. So bowl like that, buttered with excess butter. And this dough looks very nice. I would say that it's probably ready to go. And we can finish it off just a little bit on the counter. Spread a little flour, not too much. Oh, it has a little bit of fight to it. That is the gluten, all tight, has to rest and loosen up. And all the sugars in this dough are going to react with the yeast to become carbon dioxide and alcohol, forming that rising process. And so, as they say, smooth as a baby's bottom. Plop that in a bowl and cover well and let it rise until it's doubled in bulk. That takes about an hour. And if you want to avoid any sticking on the plastic wrap, a very light spray, a vegetable spray like that, and let it rise. The dough has risen. Now you can hit it and see what happens. It deflates. And we're going to cut this right in half because we're going to make 2 loaves, 8.5 by 4.5 loaf pans. And these are awfully nice. They're heavy duty. These will last you for many years if you invest in a bread pan like that. And cut your bread dough in half and shape it into a rectangle about as wide as the pan. And then start folding the dough, rolling it like this and pinching at the same time. Pinch the seam, this is going to be the underside of the bread, and tuck the edges under. Plop it down into the buttered pan. Do the same thing with the second batch. Cover it with the same plastic that you had, and just leave this in a warm, dry place until it's doubled in bulk. So the bread has risen. It took about an hour and a half to get to this size. Now this goes into a 425 degree oven, or a 400 degree oven if you're using convection, for 15 minutes. And then we're going to reduce the heat to 375 for 45 minutes. Okay, so here, oh my gosh, look at this. The white bread is very nicely done. And as soon as it comes out of the oven, just brush it with a little bit of melted butter right on the top. Now, if you're unsure whether the bread is done or not, you can stick a instant read thermometer right in the side of the bread, and the thermometer should read 205 degrees. That will ensure that the interior of the bread is cooked. Now that is pretty. Very, very beautiful bread. Makes you feel really good. You've accomplished something. And now we're going to make the multi-grain loaves. This has a lot of great stuff in it. Oats, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, soaked bulgur wheat, and cooked wheat berries, nice and plump once they're cooked. And the first step is proof the yeast. We need 2 packages of active dry yeast. Because this is a heavy bread and it has a lot of grains in it, you need 2 packages of yeast. Generally, 2 loaves of bread really require 1 package of yeast. In a half a cup of warm water, no hotter than 115 degrees. And for the food, instead of using sugar, we're using 2 teaspoons of honey. This is my flower honey, which I adore, right from my beehives. We had a bumper crop last year. I hope this year is as good. Let this just proof. You can whisk it up a little bit with a wire whisk. Okay, so assemble the rest of the ingredients. So measure out your flour into a big bowl. 1 cup of rye flour, 2 3/4 cup whole wheat flour. The rye flour, you might have a little bit of a challenge finding it. You can get it online very easily, but you can also find it in baking supply stores and in gourmet markets. We have so many of those markets in New York, we kind of take it for granted that everybody can find such things. But I'm sure you'll find it if you look for it. So that's 2 3/4 cups of whole wheat flour and 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, with 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. And you can just whisk this all together. So there, we have our dry ingredients, we have our grains, we have melted butter, 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and the yeast, which is ready to put straight into the bowl. Bread making is a good habit. And I think once people determine that it's fun and that it is healthy, I think that's when they get hooked on making bread. So 3 tablespoons of honey, 1 3/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of warm water. Oh, and don't forget the butter, 4 tablespoons of melted butter. And you can add several cups of the flour mixture. And we're using a dough hook from the start. As it mixes, add a little bit more of the dry. You can up the speed a little bit. So now finish off your dry, and now you can add the grains. Add 1 1/3 cups of cooked wheat berries. Add the 1 cup of soaked bulgur. All you do is soak the bulgur wheat in water. 1/2 cup of flaxseed. Oh, and 1/2 cup of rolled oats. And 1/3 cup of sunflower seeds. I know my wild birds would love this bread. Because this is a dense dough, you will want to knead it until it's really coming away from the sides of the bowl. Okay, so this is very well mixed, but you can see that it is still very, very sticky. I'm going to turn it out now and knead it for about 3 or 4 minutes to incorporate just maybe a little bit more flour. So here, get this turned out. Have a bench scraper ready. Doesn't that look healthy just by looking at it and smelling it? It's a healthy loaf. A little bit of flour on it. Now, when starting to knead bread, use a bench scraper in one hand, just in case you need your hand for something, because your other hand might get very sticky. And to have 2 hands sticky, use the heel of your hand and push the dough away from you. The bowl is buttered. It will take this dough, and the dough will rise until it's about doubled in size. That takes about an hour for this dough. So there, I think that is well kneaded. The dough looks good. Plunk it down in the bowl. Cover it with plastic wrap. Spray the top with a little bit of vegetable spray. And let it rise about an hour to an hour and a half. Now, it's only for this show that magic happens. The dough has doubled in size. And you, again, deflate it. Processes are pretty similar. And cut this in half. You can get that out of the bowl. Cut it as evenly as you can. You can weigh it if you want to make sure that the loaves are perfect. Most bakeries would weigh it. And again, flatten it out into a rectangle and roll it and fold it, turning in the ends and sealing this bottom seam. And there. It's very nice. Put it right into the pan. Work quickly. This is not a difficult thing to do, and you should not be afraid of your dough. Roll it up, turn in the ends. Fun part is making the loaves. Oh, and the dough feels great. It's heavy, but it's laden with good grains. Now, we brush the tops with 1 egg white mixed with a little bit of water. No yolk, just the egg white. And this will help the decorative grains that are going to be on the outside of the loaf adhere. And then just a tablespoon of flax sprinkled lightly. These are so shiny and pretty. Some of the oats. And sunflower seeds. And there. Ready to rise again before they go into the oven to rise even further and form those beautiful multi-grain loaves. About an hour until they double in bulk. So here are the loaves doubled in size, and they go right into a 450-degree oven. They look so good. Now immediately reduce the temperature and let them bake at 400 degrees for 45 minutes. So the loaves are out of the oven. You can extricate them from the pans. They've cooled a little bit so I can handle them, but they're well done, really well done. There they are. What beautiful, beautiful breads. Let them cool thoroughly before you try to cut them. And they will stay for 3 or 4 days perfectly good for sandwiches, toast, and for just bread and butter. And now for the rye bread, that delicious bread that you're going to make your pastrami sandwiches on. Half a cup of water, no warmer than 115 degrees. Add to that 2 packages of the active dry yeast, and stir the packages of yeast into your half a cup of warm water, and add approximately 2 teaspoons of honey. Let this brew for approximately 5 minutes. Now, into your mixer, 1 3/4 cup of warm water, 3 tablespoons more of honey, and 4 tablespoons of butter, melted and slightly cooled. 2 tablespoons of caraway seeds. Caraway is a member of the fennel family. Oh, and 4 1/2 teaspoons of salt. And now your yeast mixture, which is nice and creamy and just showing signs of life. So mix that up, and you start adding your flour. 2 1/2 cups of rye flour first. And 4 cups of all-purpose flour. So I think this dough has been kneaded very nicely. Now you can turn it out as we did the multi-grain bread. Just turn it right out onto a floured surface. You can see how elastic the dough is and how nicely textured it is. And again, turn with a bench scraper. Very nice dough. And you can make this into a free-form loaf, like rye bread is sold in the stores, or you can bake it in a loaf pan. Put it in a buttered bowl and cover it with plastic wrap. Again, to prevent sticking, you can just spray a little bit of vegetable spray on the plastic. Let it rise for approximately an hour to an hour and a half. So the dough has doubled in size. You can, again, deflate it, get it out of the bowl, divide it in half, and form it into 2 equal-sized loaves. And roll this up, tuck the ends in. This will rise nicely in the pans. And it takes another hour or so to have the dough double in size again. And wash with egg white and water. And sprinkle with a few caraway seeds. If you like a lot of caraway seeds, put a lot on. Cover with your plastic wrap, and in an hour, it'll be ready to go into the oven. The bread is doubled in size. Uncover it and get it right into the oven. The oven's set at 450 degrees We're going to reduce that temperature immediately to 400. And these loaves should be done in approximately 45 minutes. So here are the 2 rye loaves, nice and plump. They will make great sandwiches, great toasts, and they're great for just bread and butter. And the other loaves, oh my gosh, look how beautiful this looks. Take that when you're going away for the weekend. Your hosts will adore you. 3 great breads from Martha Bakes.